Okay, so we're going to be starting off with our weather forecast. I do apologise. I have just realised that I put up the wrong video. Please just bear with me a minute. Got some technical issues. Let's try again. Can I just double check that everybody can now see that? Yes, it should say winter 2021-2022 in Dorset. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we're going to be covering the last 3 months and have a look at the winter that we've had across Dorset. And first of all, we're going to start off by having a look at the temperatures across the county. And you're probably not going to be surprised to hear that actually we've had quite a mild winter across Dorset, and not only Dorset, but other parts of England and Wales, and also into Scotland and Northern Ireland. And to give you some facts and figures, the mean temperature for the winter was 5.2 Celsius, which in actual fact is 1.1 degree higher than the long-term average when we look at 1991 to 2010. So the mean temperature for England was 5.7 Celsius, including Dorset. So at the moment, looking at the provisional figures, it was the UK's 8th warmest winter in terms of mean temperature. Going back, sorry, I appear to have lost control. Can everybody still see? Right, okay. So this goes back to 1884, so you can see that really it was a very mild winter indeed. So looking at this, it means that half the top 10 mildest winters on record have now occurred since 2010. And one of the things to notice is that we had far fewer frosts than we would normally expect. And also, really quite surprisingly as well, is that we didn't see any long-lasting blind snow either. What we did see was a few snow flurries, but really they didn't amount to much at all. So what we really saw across much of this winter was it was fairly benign. But we'll come on to the latter part of February a little bit later on. So overall then, it was a mild winter across Dorset. How did it look in terms of rainfall? Well, again, really quite interesting because it was quite topsy-turvy from month to month. For December, around about average rainfall. Then we had a dry January. And then rainfall was slightly above for February, all due to those storms that we saw in the second half of February. But overall, the winter this year across Dorset was on the dry side. So one of the things that is sort of quite interesting is this to do with climate change? So that is a question to ponder as we go through the next few slides. So one of our other aspects that we look at is sunshine. And we were quite unusual really in Dorset because some part of the county saw a little bit more than usual, and then other parts of the county saw slightly less than usual. But what you can see from this graphic on the right-hand side of the slide is that the eastern half of the UK saw much more sunshine than the west, with the north of England actually seeing one of its sunniest winters ever. England as a whole received over 100% of its average, and as we've just seen, Dorset was split between around just over that average and just under that average. And then we moved on to named storms. And the named storms that we saw in the winter were Bara, Malik, which you may think, well, that's a bit of an odd one, but that was actually named by Denmark because that storm went across the northern part of the UK and intensified as it went across Denmark, hence why Denmark named it. And then we also had Corrie, Dudley, Eunice, and finally Franklin. You may wonder, well, where does Arwen fit into this? But actually Arwen happened at the end of November, which was just in the latter part of autumn rather than winter. So what we saw during a week in February were storms Dudley, Eunice and Franklin rampage across the UK in just 1 week in the middle of February. So this is the first time that this has occurred since storm naming was introduced way back in 2015, 2016. And you can see from the graphic in the bottom right hand side that we had 2 rare red weather warnings issued for Storm Eunice, and this was the most severe and damaging storm to affect England and Wales since February 2014. So we saw winds gusting over 80 miles an hour in exposed coastal locations with 90-mile-an-hour gusts at Portland Bill. And just up the coast on the Needles Old Battery in the Isle of Wight, we saw a record gust of 122 miles an hour. And that set a New England record for wind gusts. So unusually, from Storm Eunice, we saw winds gusting wildly over 70 miles an hour, even well inland. And that's why we saw so much sort of tree damage, structural damage, and also transport disruption as well, which we can see from the pictures here. And these storms formed a part of a turbulent spell of wet and windy weather for the UK, and it was all associated with a powerful jet stream. And the thing about Storm Eunice was it was closely followed on the heels by Storm Franklin across Dorset, and this hampered cleanup operations, including power restoration following Storm Eunice. So that's just to give a break between our review of the winter before I go on to looking at the weather forecast now for Dorset. And I'm going to start off by looking at the weather for the next 5 days. And, you know, it's early spring. And for the rest of this week, it's going to be quite changeable. But I think on the whole, we're going to have lots of dry weather around. We are going to see a little bit of rain every now and again, especially on Friday, as that sets us up for a bit of an unsettled weekend. But nevertheless, we are going to see some sunshine and we're going to see some cloud. It's going to be a bit blustery, but on the whole, it is going to be quite mild for this part of March, although it is going to feel cool in that wind. So all in all, you know, quite a benign week of March weather. For the coming weekend, though, it starts to go downhill a little bit. We are going to see some rain at times, but not going to be raining all the time. And we will see some drier and brighter skies as well, with a little bit of sunshine. It is going to be windy, though, but it will be milder, although, again, it's not going to feel particularly warm in the wind. And then looking further afield to the rest of March and April, when we really start to get into spring proper, we are really going to continue to see really quite changeable spring weather. At the moment, we're not seeing anything hugely out of the ordinary, although what we are going to see is temperatures are going to be around or a bit above the seasonal normal. So I think we're looking at, again, like the winter, we're going to see mild weather. We are going to see quite a bit of dry and bright weather too, with some spring sunshine. But equally, we have to remember that March and April do tend to be changeable spring months. So we are likely to see some spells of wet and windy weather. And again, this could be possibly impactful. But what I do need to say is that if there are any further named storms that will come along, and the next one is Storm Gladys, then of course we'll keep you updated through all the Met Office comms particularly on social and digital media. And I will also be providing updates to the local resilience forum partner agents as well. So between us, hopefully if there is any impactful weather through the rest of March and April, we will be seeing it well ahead and being able to prepare and plan and also respond and recover in a very smooth way. So thank you very much indeed for listening to me in a rather croaky voice, reviewing the winter and also looking at the weather ahead for the rest of March and April. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Penny. So I am just going to add a little tiny bit to go with that from the Environment Agency on what we'd expect to see on a flood perspective. Excuse me for having me this morning. You'd normally have Guy, but unfortunately Guy has gone down with COVID and is recovering at home. I think he's been hit by kind of like not too nicely. So apologies in advance, but we do have a recording of him in a minute. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Lovely, thank you. So what we've got here is at the moment, as you're seeing, this report was taken in February, and part of it is showing we can see groundwater levels at the end of January. So you can see that we've got they are showing as normal or slightly below normal for the time of year for us. And actually with the river flows, what we're showing is the rivers that you can also see as well, that they are showing as normal or slightly below normal, which I think you'll all agree is fairly good news at this stage. And if we go on, we can see that, oh, hold on, if I can go back one. This is the flood outlook and the sensitivity to rainfall. You can actually see from this map down where we are that Dorset is in a good position for this time of year, and we have a relatively low sensitivity to rainfall at this moment in time as well. And with a very little bit further look, this just gives us an overall sensitivity. So coastal and tidal, we have low risk. Rivers, surface water and groundwater as well at the moment is seen as fairly low. And we have our next spring tides, which are starting on Friday the 18th. But the tides aren't at this moment. We're not forecasting any coastal issues. I think that is effectively what I have to offer you at the moment. So if everyone would like to stay with us, I actually now have another little session, which I think we can run straight into if that's okay, where we will be looking at river levels, at checking for flooding online. And what I have to say here is I have a very short presentation that Guy recorded for Wiltshire Prepared, because as I said, he would have been here presenting today if he wasn't ill. And he, bear with me one moment, I'm just trying to find it because it's all of a sudden, having got all this lined up, it's just decided it's going to play up. We've got a morning of tech issues here, I think. It's fun and games. Fun and games. Hold on. Bear with me one second. No.
Nigel, it's Matt. It looks like Lisa's dropped out. I don't know if you're able just to step in and just until we get her back.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, well, apologies, ladies and gents. Obviously, it's our first day, and we're all having some technical issues. There is a chat in the sidebar, so if you'd like to ask any of our guys, Penny or Lisa, any questions, please put some messages in the chat, or Penny's online, which is great. Now we can see Penny. So if you guys have got any questions, please fire away for Penny on the weather forecast and the recent weather we've had over the last few months. I got a question for you, Penny. So Storm Eustace was probably one of the most impactful for storms we've had since 2013, 2014. Are we going to start seeing a bigger trend with the with this kind of weather going forward?
So Nigel, that's a really good question, and I think the jury is still out regarding storm intensity and storm frequency across the UK when it comes to climate change. But what we can say regarding climate change for the UK is that we can expect milder, wetter winters, and we certainly saw a milder winter just gone across Dorset. We have seen some wetter weather through this winter as well, February, being a notable case. But having said that, January was really quite a dry month. Also looking at sea level, we know that sea level has been rising and is expected to continue to rise as we see glaciers and ice sheets, particularly in the Antarctic and in the Arctic, continuing to melt. So that's helping to raise sea level. And then finally, hotter and drier summers. But as we saw last summer, when we do see rainfall, it can be far more intense, and we see really quite heavy thundery downpours, which can lead to an increase, particularly in surface water issues. And we saw that, in parts of Dorset during last summer, and also further afield in England and Wales, particularly London, and also Chard and Somerset as well, just to give a couple of examples. And we also had the devastating flooding in nearby continent in Holland, Belgium and Germany. So without doubt, we are going to see further extreme and severe weather events increasing as we go through to 2100. But again, it all depends on how the world collectively works together to mitigate the output of greenhouse gases, and also how we adapt as well across the world, because not everywhere we're not going to see a uniform change to our climate across the world. Some places are not going to see a huge amount of change, but we've already seen across parts of Africa and Asia in particular, and as well as actually Australasia as well, really quite marked changes in extreme and severe weather, which then also can have knock-on effects to other natural hazards. And the one that I'm really thinking about here is wildfires. We've seen across Australia, northern part of Asia, across North America as well, due to very dry and also drought conditions, as well as high temperatures and really quite strong winds as well, that these have been conditions ripe for then wildfires when they do start off to then really take hold. So coming back to your question, Nigel, as far as storms are concerned, named storms, then I think what we have seen, and which we can talk about, is that we are seeing more heavy rainfall from them across the UK, and that's certainly been borne out by several storms over the last 5-10 years. Storm Desmond across Cumbria, Storm Christoph a couple of years ago. And then only just last year, we had Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis within a week of each other, which led to widespread flooding across England and Wales. So it's a really difficult one, but I think from the rainfall aspect, because a warmer climate can hold more moisture, which then leads to more intense rainfall, then from that point of view, definitely we will be seeing more of that in the future.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
It certainly
Michael.
does. It's a very comprehensive answer, Penny. It's very difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, to kind of predict, and we have got a climate change session tomorrow, in fact, ladies and gents. So be sure to tune into that one. We do have one question on the side chat, Penny, from Malcolm Monroe. He says an interesting summary of the last 10 years. He's since retired from the EA flood teams in 2015, and before he's noticed generally cooler northwest airflows both summer and winter. Is there a general trend of more polar maritime returning weather and signs of a more active weather mix for the UK?
So I think what we're going to see is that we are going to continue to see a real mix of weather as we, continue to transition. As I say, to those sort of three main things: milder, wetter winters, hotter, drier summers, but still intense downpours, but also sea level rise as well. What we did see with Storm Arwen was that we saw some very unusual strong winds blowing in from the north or northwest, particularly across northern parts of UK, and that's one of the reasons why we saw so much damage to the power infrastructure, because it was an unusual direction, so less resilience than from the southwest or westerly wind direction. But I think certainly we're seeing, we're going to continue to see unusual, severe, extreme weather, because that is what climate change is all about. How is it going to change the climate that we had up to about 10, 20 years ago? But I think what we'll also see is certainly in the summer, we've seen more winds coming in from the south or southeast, because that's the wind direction that brings us heat waves in during the summer. And so we've certainly, we've seen a higher frequency of those as well. So yeah, it's all to do with climate change.
Great, lovely. Thanks very much, Penny. As you may have seen in the sidebar, Lisa's also had some major technical problems. So all her internet went down, same as mine. So if you would like to watch the video on checking river groundwater, sea and rainfall levels, there's a link that Lisa's put in there. And she could also post that link in the Dorset Prepared event page. So you can look at that at your leisure when you have time. So Matt, I think the next thing I can see that Ian is online, and Andrew. So